All right. So, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to episode 6 of AI Business Asia podcast. I'm your host, Leo Jiang. I've been in the tech industry for over 20 years, being recognized as one of the top 10 chief digital officer globally, now founder of AI Business Asia. Today, we'll be exploring AI in biopharmaceutical industry, one of the most AI-empowered industry. So I had a pleasure to invite Dr. Santoshi Karthikeyan, a Global Tech Director of AstraZeneca, one of the largest biopharmaceutical company in the world, operating over 100 plus countries. He's been recognized as the top AI voice on LinkedIn, TEDx speakers, specialized in clinical data insights. So welcome to the show, Dr. Santoshi.
Thank you, Leo. Thanks for having me in this podcast. A really pleasure to connect with you and the audience.
Awesome. Maybe just share a bit more of your journey. I mean, you've been the director of such large biopharmaceutical company specializing in clinical data and insights. I believe before you were as a chief architect at Pfizer. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and how you see AI is evolving in your industry over the past 8 to 10 years?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it short. I started my journey as a .NET developer, then way back a couple of decades back. Then I got an opportunity to transition myself into data warehousing project where I was typically into the reporting side. So that's where I made myself entry into the data world, and it was a mix of ETL as well as the reporting solutions as part of the service-based organizations I was into. Then I got an opportunity to step into the big data world. That was a boom a few years back, where the Hadoop ecosystem and especially around Apache Spark's setup, and I was part of doing a POC because big data was booming at that time. So if I had to talk about the data science journey, I started off the data science journey in 2012, where I was leading a team of data scientists, especially working for the life science domain. So it's almost more than 10 years now, I would say, since I have been into the data science journey, and now we are in the AI era. So data science is not something new, but I think the different industries are picking up based on the market trend, and I feel that all the leadership have a focus on embedding AI as part of their scorecard within the industry.
Yeah. And specifically, in your own industry, either being with Pfizer and AstraZeneca today, how do you see AI is empowering or being adopted within that industry? Because I always had this impression, for example, with clinical trial discovery, X-ray scanning, AI has been quite instrumental, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's a fantastic experience within the biopharmaceutical industry, because as we all know, like it's a highly regulated industry, but we are looking at an opportunity where we can embed the AI into the trial process, starting from drug discovery till the market surveillance. So we are looking into an opportunity where we can kind of embed AI into each of these clinical trial phase to accelerate the
Hmm.
clinical trial process. That's where
Hmm.
each of the industry companies are trying to see how they can embed these technologies ethically as well as responsibly, because it is
Hmm.
also equally important that we handle data responsibly, and also make sure that the pharma value chain is embedded with technology, and finally we help the patient reach the medicine faster. So that's something
Right.
each of the industry companies are focusing upon.
Interesting. Could you break it down, since you mentioned about a few key phases like drug discovery, right? Regulatory approval. I guess you mentioned getting approval from
Mm.
regulatory body of a government and finally release it to the market. Can you give us the key milestones along this process? And I guess the second question is, which process is the most time consuming or ones that really need AI or can benefit from AI?
Sure. So, if you take the clinical trial process, it starts with the drug discovery process, which where scientists look for the new molecules. That's where the new drug development process begins, and that's where it's more time-consuming process as well, in terms of the overall pharma value chain. And then next comes the pre-clinical process. That's where the test happens, in terms of the testing before it's going to transition into the human subjects. That's where
Mm,
we call it as a human subjects in clinical terms,
mm,
where the volunteers come into the enrollment program, and they get into the testing phase. That's where the clinical development process begins, and there are various phases associated with it. And
mm,
once it goes through that particular process, the FDA and the regulatory bodies along comes into the picture, and they review the overall program, and a lot of governance comes into picture, right, in terms of the regulatory perspective. And finally we move into the phase of post market surveillance. That's where drug is marketed. So if you take the overall journey of this drug development process, the drug discovery process is time consuming, and also an indication for all the technologists, especially in the biopharmaceutical industry, to look into the opportunities where they can embed AI, where they can support the R&D scientists in identification of molecules. Is there a way we can kind of identify new trends in the different therapeutic areas the
mm,
scientists are into?
mm.
So,
So the reason why the drug discovery or discover the new molecules being the most difficult part, is that because what's key reason behind why is that taking so much time?
yeah, it's a complex process. I cannot talk about a scientist life, but I
Yeah.
can talk from a technology perspective, right? Because
Mm,
there are a lot of efforts that has to go through, because there are various stakeholders also involved in this process, when we go for the target identification and the new molecular docking, and there are also new protein elements, right, which comes into picture. So it is a
mm,
complex process for all the pharma industries, and that's where the technology comes into picture, right? If I have to take an example, can we do an image analysis in terms of identifying any different trends, and use the data that is available to kind of identify new patterns, which can
mm,
be of potential aid for the R&D scientists, right?
mm,
For it could be in any therapeutic areas, right? Like it could be oncology, or respiratory and immunology, or CVRM, or any other therapeutic areas. But what the scientists look for is there any kind of a technology aid I can get, which can support me in the drug development process. That's
mm,
where the technology and science kind of fusion together in each of these phases, which I mentioned.
mm,
And just I wanted to highlight, right, based on my experience, like when we kind of talk to the scientist, there are different problems that comes into the discussion, right, or the challenges they get into the discussion. And it was fascinating to know there are 100 plus use cases which was brought on the table when we do
mm.
our brainstorming sessions,
Wow.
uh, um, even within the industry also, right, when we have a consortium where different companies come together. So there are a lot of discussion that happens, but it is still evolving, right? I would not say like we have reached to a point where, okay, I can say like we have productionized everything, but it's a long way, and it's a long journey, and we are in the process. Yeah.
So out of this 100 use cases, which one you consider the best?
No, this is just an example, right? I'm just
Right.
quoting an example, but there are, I mean, it depends on the requirement. It could be a Gen AI solution, or it could be a kind of a predictive analytics for doing a KPI risk analysis. So there are different use cases, and there are different AI related technology we can embed in, right? So there is no kind of apple to apple comparison we can do, but it all depends on what is that you're trying to solve as a problem.
Yeah.
And if I had to give a recent example, it could be a virtual assistant which can help the data managers in terms of supporting them with the protocol documentation, for
Mm.
example. So similarly,
Mm.
there are many such examples, right, which we can think of, which the industry is trying to solve.
Right. So if I critique on what you said,
Mhm.
drug discovery probably been the most lengthy process, which I guess probably translate into most costly steps of the entire value chain. Um, I guess the reason there's complex, as you mentioned, about finding the new molecules and protein discovery, all that stuff.
Mhm.
If AI can have a way or has a role to shorten that process, that would have a significant impact to the entire process. And if you look at the AI evolution from being very analytical, mostly machine learning driven, to where you just call it like Gen AI, generative AI, and if I look one step further, like agentic service coming up, how are these AI possibilities is helping this process? I think I can look at it from productivity, of course, helping people to find a better way of doing things is probably good. But I always feel it's a secondary to what was a core problem that you're trying to solve, which is shorten the discovery process. So can you just expand a bit more on how is AI being used at the core problem?
Yeah. So let's look at at an industry lens, right? There
Mm,
are every day there are new tools and solutions coming in the market. But do you think we can directly go and use these tools? The short answer is no, because
mm,
as I said, like it's a highly regulated industry. We have to factor in multiple things, right? Because it should not spoil the reputation of any of the organization by using these tools. So we have to take a constructive approach, right, in onboarding any of these AI solutions as well. For example, there is an assessment which has to be done in terms of using a tool. For example, whether the tool is prone to any kind of security vulnerabilities, how the solution look like, and how the data is being stored. So those kind of questions we need to answer, right? And also there are some guidelines which has been put forth by FDA, where the different biopharmaceutical companies need to adhere to in terms of keeping patient data in mind, and how the sensitive data is being protected, and how the overall monitoring of the platform also happens. So as a developer, it might be frustrating, or as a technologist, it might be a frustrating element when we want to inject technology into this particular
mm,
clinical trial process. But we need to have that patience, right? Because at the end of the day, the patients are going to benefit, and they are our customers, right, for the biopharmaceutical industry. So we have to make sure that we are, as I said in the beginning, we have to responsible in onboarding any of the AI solution,
mm,
and also make sure that there is an end-to-end governance framework that is being built by the organizations, so that they
mm,
can track like which tool is being onboarded and who is using those tools, and also the cyber security assessment, and the data governance. So there are different, I would say, a checklist needs to be followed when using these tools, and that's where the time consuming element comes into picture, right? Because there is a lot of hands into that particular life cycle. So that's why it is.
can you give some examples of uh, I guess use cases or
Mhm.
area that or project that you're working on that you see great benefits of AI, either from a tool perspective or from model perspective?
Sure. I'll give you some typical example in the industry. So one project I worked upon was a few years back, was on the predictive analytics project, where we were trying to kind of identify the adverse drug reaction. So that was using the SAP HANA as a in-memory database.
Mm,
So pull the data from the drug bank and build an ML model using the logistic regression and also the confusion matrix for assessment of the performance. So that model helps to kind of identify the adverse drug reaction for each of the combination of the molecules. So which was stored in the SAP HANA database, and then the prediction outputs were kind of used in the presentation layer of Tableau, which is more data visualization tool. So which helps the
Mm.
scientists to analyze like which drug is having the adverse event. So this is one typical example. And the other example I can think of is, let me take the recent example of ChatGPT, right? And
Okay.
again, ChatGPT is something I would like to tell about more from an industry perspective. Is we cannot directly use for example, OpenAI solution, and we cannot use the public version of the OpenAI solution because, as I said, we have to go through this assessment process. That's where we have to build in a validated platform, which we call it from the pharma terms GXP. So we have to make sure that the platform is GXP validated platform, and the data is not stored for a longer duration. And so we have a kind of a closed, I'll put it in simple terms, right? We have a kind of a
Close
closed
instance.
environment where
Yep.
you can test these models. It could be on the
Yep.
GPT 3.5 or 4
Yep.
turbo models. So we test each of these models, and especially from the platform side, and then we kind of roll it out to users in terms of doing the use case testing for the typical chat GPT use cases. And it's a slow process, right? Again, as I said, it not be as quick as we see in the public version, but we take a constructive and the responsible approach, right, in using even the chat GPT version of it. So these are a couple of examples I can think of. And another example would be the virtual assistant, right, where I spoke about building a chatbot solution for the data manager, since I'm into clinical data
Mm.
management. So chatbot for data manager, which can support to kind of easily search and find the different documents, guidance documents
Mm.
for the data managers. So
Mm.
all these kind of use cases, or the solution is to kind of help the consumers kind of expedite the process of doing their activities.
On the ChatGPT example,
Mhm.
so I've spoken to a few other large organizations, mostly in banking. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's not new that people employ on a private version of it.
Mhm.
Obviously, OpenAI don't do this a lot. You have
Mhm.
to be a pretty large organization. But I think last year they released an enterprise version service as well.
Mhm.
So I think that probably changed. So for me, how you're evaluating this model is that to understand the model capability, then apply those model in certain use cases like a virtual assistant, for example. What is the key thing that you're looking for by testing these models, whether it's from OpenAI or cloud or from even open source?
So there is a risk management framework where the larger enterprises are building upon, right? So there is a risk framework which is being developed by the organizations, which is an indicator from high to low risk indicators. What it indicates is, for example, whether the solution or the data being used handles the patient data. If yes, then it's come under high risk category. So there is a assessment process which goes through, right, when we kind of use this AI model, whether it falls into the high risk category or the low risk category. So and also when we kind of onboard the third party vendors or any of these ChatGPT solution, they go through a cybersecurity assessment process and the privacy impact assessment,
Mm, mm,
especially around the data part of it. So
sure.
there are different dedicated teams within an enterprise who kind of takes care of these assessment, and then it comes to the delivery team, right, in terms of doing some pilot testing around and share any feedback. So it's a kind of a iterative cycle, right, in terms of using these tools and providing feedback, and they take it back to the vendors and kind of fix it. So it's more like a partnership journey, right, that happens with these tools being onboarded and the assessment being done, and then we kind of get into a mode where we kind of test these functionalities, right, like how the tool look like, and is there any kind of even customization that needs to be built in terms of giving a message to the internal employees in using these tools. So a lot of things that happens within an organization. So I would put it this way, right? The risk assessment plays a key role, and also the different assessment around the governance also
Mm.
comes into picture.
I see. I see. So you're trying to evaluate whether different model can comply to your
Yeah,
own like risk assessment framework. And
correct.
and
Yeah.
and do you have preference in terms open source or closed source?
So it depends. I mean, even we use the open source solutions, but I would say, like, if I have to take an example, we let me take this example, Hugging Face, right? I mean,
Mm.
we don't use Hugging Face because there are some identified models, pre-built LLMs, right? There are some restrictions in using the tool, especially in an enterprise setup, and even it could be any of the other solution. It could be AWS Bedrock or OpenAI, right? So it has to go through the assessment process, and once it is being given a go ahead from our data office team, that's where it comes to the delivery teams in terms of using these tools. I mean, to answer your question, yeah, we do use open source solution, but it goes through a series of assessment, and then
Sure.
it gets onboarded to use it. Yeah.
So there's no bias whether because they are open source or
No,
closed source.
no,
Okay.
no,
So the
no.
criteria is the
Exactly.
same.
Yeah,
Okay.
criteria is the same, and it all depends on how the platform is trustable
Got it.
after going through this assessment process. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. You earlier on you mentioned about SAP in SAP HANA.
Yeah.
Actually, I will be having head of product engineering coming onto my show next week
Hmm.
from SAP talking about their large language model. As you know, they have their own,
Hmm.
and from my research, they have a version specialized in structured data, especially they've been dealing with tabular data for so many years. So based on your experience, like, what do you see as company like SAP? They've been on the enterprise side for so many years. They understand the governance, the assessment, the privacy, and everything. Would you say they have a great advantage over the new large organization like OpenAI, who probably more coming from research and now going to a profit organization, but doesn't have that in-depth experience and knowledge with enterprise? So how do you see the existing AI company like SAP versus the newborn, the new kids on the block like OpenAI?
So SAP, yeah, what I understand is SAP has built in several AI capabilities, and they are kind of building the different solutions, right? The modules we have. Yeah, again. There should be a complementary effort, right, in terms of using any of the other tools versus SAP, right? Definitely, SAP has the potential to kind of cater to the SAP environment itself, because SAP is a big suite, right?
Yeah.
HANA is one component, so there are different modules associated with it. And even I heard, like, the SAP AI is something being kind of looked into, where the different modules can pick up the AI capabilities within the SAP environment. And SAP is also something which is more built around a kind of a security layer, right, within the SAP package itself. So I think it all depends on the use case, and also for the non SAP world, yeah, definitely there are tools available in the market. It could be commercial tools and the
Mm.
open source solution. But the SAP world, I think they still stick on with the SAP solutions, and I think
Right.
SAP is also looking into the advancement, right? They are injecting that new capabilities like AI, I'm hoping that they will be also introducing the LLMs into it. I'm not sure about the latest update, but yeah, I'm hoping
Yeah.
they are into it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a few articles from I
Mhm.
think Philip, who is the chief AI officer, published a few
Mhm.
articles. Yeah, I think that would be something interesting. I'll be asking. It would be a good question to ask SAP when it comes to the show.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then coming back to the models like Hugging Face, OpenAI, do you see any models coming out of India? Oh, because most of these models are coming out of US or European.
Mhm.
Do you see anything interesting from Asia, like border Asia perspective?
I love this question because this is something I talk about in different conferences because there are a lot of things going on, which I think we need to kind of build awareness within the Asia community or even beyond, right? Because
Mm,
we are talking about EU AI Act and the US regulations around AI. But just wanted to highlight of my previous year's attendance in one of the Global AI Summit, which was hosted in New Delhi, India, where
mm,
that if all the companies came together as a consortium to build a responsible AI framework. We are also leading on certain initiatives around responsible AI. What is the framework that the organizations can leverage, keeping the different consideration, in fact, ethical consideration, in fact. And one thing that surprised me when while attending this AI summit was there were 100 plus startups who were part of the conference. So I was really amazed to see there are products being built, AI products being built by the startup, and there are a lot of government initiatives and kind of a startup ecosystem that is building within India and as well as Asia. The startup founders are looking at an opportunity, right, to tap into the AI ecosystem, and it looks promising, right? So given that we have a kind of a potential use case or trying to solve an industry problem, that's where the startup can get into the next step, right? So I think that's a good opportunity, and it looks really promising, as I told about my experience of attending that AI summit. So it's not just about you or US, but also Asia is also coming with a lot
mm.
of initiatives. So it's a ongoing journey.
What is the strength of Asian startups, or let's just say specific India
Mm.
startups
Mm.
versus the US or other countries,
Mhm.
in your opinion?
I think it was more than 100 plus startups which were kind of having their kind of I would say like booths, right? The stall booths within the conference, and I was listening to some of the startups around. I think it was around image analysis, and there were, I mean, they were picking up different industry, even in agricultural industry. They were picking up use cases, and even in drone industry there were
Mm,
use cases. So it depends on which use cases we want to look into and which startup we want to collaborate with, right? So that
mm,
is also important. But I'm really amazed by the experience I had attending this conference, because I get to know about different companies, startups emerging,
mm,
and there are a lot of other startups coming into picture, right? And good to know that the startup ecosystem is being supported by the government and other
mm,
subsidies.
mm. 100% agree. Government has a key role to support the startup
Mm.
ecosystem. So as a large
Yeah.
organization. I
Mhm.
recall I was in Paris, I think
Mhm.
2022 for the Viva Tech. So that's one of the
Mhm.
largest tech conference in France. And you
Mhm.
have all these large organizations from, LVMH to,
Mhm. Mhm.
BNP Paribas and, UK large company, HSBC, all these large corporations. And what really impressed me is as they showcase their key product and services, they have this like satellite area where each one of them will have 10 startups around them. Obviously, they're advocating their own services, but it's almost like the more startups that I have, it shows more of innovative approach that we're taking in
Yeah.
advancing our own digital transformation. So I think it's absolutely key for MNCs to have a framework and an ecosystem to support the innovation. Which is probably a good question to ask. Like, what kind of framework do you have within your own organization to support the founders and startups, to work with you to help you with the different use cases.
Yeah, especially given an larger organization or an enterprise organization, there is a kind of a procurement strategy that comes into picture, or I'll put it this way, like the supplier assessment.
Mm,
That's where it comes into picture, and there are various parameters that needs to fill in, right, in terms of the capabilities, in terms of trying to solve our challenges, and also what I touched upon in the earlier conversation is around how the solution is built in a way that can solve a problem rather trying to sell their product, right? So it is important to for a particular supplier or any of the startup to kind of articulate in a way or build a business model in a way that can solve the problem of the enterprise. It could be any industry, right? And also it's more about partnership. We are looking for partners who can join us in this journey. It's a two-way conversation, right? And also how far the flexibility for the startups in terms of looking at the overall journey of the requirements coming from the enterprise, and they should be flexible in terms of going through these assessments, right? I know it's little painful in terms of doing
yeah,
these assessments, and also patience is required because it's time consuming,
yeah,
but it's a constructive journey, right, being in highly regulated industry. And
yeah.
that's where the usp is like have that patience and also build a solution which factors in the ethical consideration and also is trying to solve a particular use case.
Okay, so if I'm summarizing what you said is you're
Mhm.
looking for startups who are capable or have the right type of capability, able to
Yeah.
solve your problems or able to demonstrate a way to solving a problem and being
Yeah.
flexible.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to add to this is I observed based on the industry trend is most of the startups come with a technology solution, but they need to kind of have the domain expertise embedded within that startup ecosystem, because it's a blend of domain as well as technology. Because it's all about it's about the knowing the industry, right? Because unless
Hmm.
you know about the domain, you cannot cater to the needs of the requirements. They need to know about the clinical trials, for example. If they want to kind of embed into the clinical trial journey, they need to have the domain expertise within their ecosystem, along with the technology. So that's one of the key consideration, I would say, for the startups.
Mm. In your own experience, have you seen any good startups who have made good progress towards working with a pharmaceutical organizations?
Yeah, there are many. I would say like Benevolent AI is one of the company I can think of. Yeah, there are
So what's
many.
the name of the
I
company?
cannot
Bevan AI.
Benevolent. And also there are a few startups based on the region specific startups, right? I heard of a few European startups who are supporting the region specific business functions. So there are a lot of kind of, I would say, like there are like siloed kind of partnership that happens within an enterprise. But I think there are open conversation that happens, right? Given that they meet all these checklists and they are ready to kind of
Mm.
onboard into the enterprise governance.
Then, if we look into the future, what excites you the most in terms of the AI development within your own industry?
Yeah, it's first of all, the technology advancement is really amazing, right? Because every day, as I said, like every day we see some new updates coming in within Gen AI or the AI solution. But when we talk about the industry adoption, yeah, it is a kind of a constructive process. But we have to see how we can embed technology with science. So that's more important, right? And how these AI solutions adopt to the catering needs of the pharmaceutical industry, given that they meet all the responsible AI as well as the ethical consideration, right? So I think that would be a key factor when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry. I think even it could apply to the banking industry as well. So
Mm.
I think a lot of sensitive
Uh,
data is being handled.
right. So let's talk about being a responsible AI or building a responsible AI. And then
Mhm.
the fact that all today's large language models are trained on public data. We,
Mhm.
I personally don't know whether there's enough public data in the clinicals, and I assume not because they are very regulated industry, to your point. So then the question is, does the AI companies, these model companies, even have the ability to build responsible AI when they're not from that industry? And you also mentioned about when these startups to innovate, they better come in from industry perspective. And your industry is not like any other industry where people just understand it, get it. Not only they don't, but they also don't have access to those data points. So does that mean company like AstraZeneca have a better role to play in building responsible AI within this industry? Is there a possibility for a company who are not from industry to help building responsible AI?
Yeah, so let me talk about from an industry perspective. Is like there is a responsible AI framework being built by the pharmaceutical industry, and even I was recently part of the NASCOM assessment in terms of building the responsible AI framework, especially for the AI developers. So I can share you a kind of a link, and also a public release document where we are talking about the ethical use of AI in the industry. So there is a lot of frameworks that is being built for the public use, and also which can be a factor in, right, in terms of how the data can be used. And to touch upon one of your thought around the public data set, we still do use it in terms of the trustable data, or the clinical data that is available, like a drug bank is one of the example, because we also need some of the kind of varied data sets in terms of the analysis part of it. So we do have some of the kind of sources which we can look into from a data perspective. My proposal is like I know like there are a lot of consortium being built around responsible AI framework, but all pharma companies can still come together to kind of build a common framework, right, which the startups can tap into, right, because it could be a reference point for the startups as well. So that's something we need to check whether it's already available or it's in progress. But I think that would be a kind of a key element, right, in terms of providing a reference, like what are the different parameters we need to look into. Because if I have to think on data perspective, we are talking about fair data, like which is
Mm.
findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So how the data is fair. So verification of data also is a important element that comes into picture. And the other one is on the ethical consideration, and how the model is behaving from an bias standpoint, whether it is bias free from an algorithm standpoint. So that's one of the parameters we need to check, and how the model is from a data privacy standpoint. Yeah, there are many other assessment, right, that we need to consider. And I'm hoping that these frameworks which is being built by the different industries as part of the consortium is going to be a guiding reference for us.
Do you see progression in this approach,
Yeah,
building
absolutely.
responsible?
Yes,
Mm.
yes. Yeah, I see a lot of discussions happening as we speak around solving some of these challenges, and a lot of white papers are coming up, right? Especially around responsible AI. And as I said, like even from India, India has been leading one of the discussions around responsible AI, where all the countries came together in sharing their perspective, and there is a kind of a declaration being shared by the consortium. So there are a lot of resources available. So it could be a good guiding reference for all the startups, right, to tap into
Mm.
these kind of references, and see how they can kind of onboard those into their services, so that it will help them to kind of having the conversation with the larger organization, or any other organization per se.
Mm. That's interesting. I'm certainly looking forward to see more progress in this direction. And if I think one step further, if there is great progression being made on the responsible AI for this industry, how is this going to impact the industry? To be concise, what do you think will be the biggest impact of AI on your industry, on biopharmaceutical industry in the coming years?
Yeah, it is very. I would say like it's a promising future, because we are embedding AI into our pharmaceutical value chain, as we discussed in this conversation. I think it is important for everyone working in the industry, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, to be mindful of the technology we use. It starts from the developer, right? It's not just for the leaders to be mindful of that. It starts from the employees at different career levels to be mindful of the tools being used, how they should be responsible, right, in using these solutions. And also one of the challenges we need to address as an industry is how we are going to meet the talent pool, because I was recently looking into one of the Gartner survey where it was talking about the skill gaps. So we need to kind of cross skill the internal employees in terms of building those skills, and that's where different industries are looking at how they can train their internal employees and
Mm.
around AI, and they are launched different Gen AI training programs and career pathway, right, where people can at least build the foundational skills needed to talk on AI and also work on AI. So all the organizations are focusing around that. So it's important to address the skill gap is one of the key challenge, and especially around the adoption of these AI solution. That's where we definitely need stringent governance, and again, this is a very critical pathway, right, in terms of the enterprise solution itself.
Mm. Do you think people will lose jobs in your industry because of AI?
Definitely not, because that's a common that's a common myth. I mean, it's not just my industry; it's across the industry, right? Because people fear what's going to happen, but definitely not. But I think the focus will shift on value added activities, right? Because I still remember the days when we are talking about robotic process automation (RPA)
Mm.
solutions, the
Mm.
bot solutions coming into picture. People were afraid of whether I'm going to lose my job.
Mm.
Yeah, there are, I mean, cases like where it has addressed some of the back office activities in terms of automation effort. But we have to put a different lens in terms as a human, right? I mean, it is improving the efficiency and it is bringing in automation, right? And so that we can focus on value added activities. So definitely AI is not going to take away our jobs. It's all
Mm.
about our adoption
Upskill.
or the cross skilling of upskilling into
Yeah,
AI. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
important. Yeah.
100%, 100% agree. My personal belief is we will lose. We don't lose jobs. We will lose certain requirements. People to
Correct.
do what they do today, probably the way they do it is no longer required. But as we progress, if as technology progress, if we upskill ourselves, we will be having a new way of doing things, and I still need people to operate
Yeah.
those things. Just like people used to use a
Yeah.
calculator, now they use computers. People used to ride
Absolutely.
horses, now they're riding a car.
Yeah,
So great.
absolutely. And also,
Mm,
we have to. I have a different perspective to this, right? When you ask about whether people will
mm,
lose job, I would say like it
mm,
will create more opportunities because there are a lot of roles emerging, right? It could be on the
mm,
deep learning engineering side, or it could be
mm,
on the prompt engineer sides. And
mm,
see, data science and AI is a big ocean, right? There are different roles associated with it. Some could be more interested towards programming, where they can get into building the models, and there are different kind of roles that is emerging, like prompt engineers, and there are different roles within data governance itself where they can work on data being an asset, right? They can be a data steward or the product owner. So there are different roles that are emerging within an organization where they can tap into, right? And it's a interesting one to explore as well. So I think it's going to give a lot of opportunities, but for that we
mm.
need to be skilled enough. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a very promising future. And if I can ask you to leave some advice to two type of personnel, maybe to start with your peers who are also embarking on this journey within the industry, their approach towards AI. Could you give some advice to them?
Yeah, sure. But for the pharmaceutical industry, yes, we see the technology advancements that is happening, but we should also pioneer in using the data ethically and responsibly. So responsible AI is something which I want to reiterate again and again, right? Because
Mm,
it's the core value of the framework, and it's very important because we are handling the patient's data. So very important for the peers to understand about the responsible AI and the ethical consideration, and also that building a strong data governance within an organization is critical for the pharmaceutical industry.
mm. Okay. So focus on being responsible, making sure the core of your industry is protected.
If I have to add, it is also important to build the awareness among all the employees working in an organization. So it is
Mm,
important to build the data culture, right, within an organization where they understand the value of data, how they are using the data, and how they are responding to different tools available in the market. Are we using the right trustable software into our machines? So that's something a developer should think, right? It's not just for the leader to think, but also a developer should think whether I'm using the right tool for the right solution, because the data being used is very sensitive. Yeah.
got it. And then the flip side of the equation, if you're advising a founder who are not from this industry, or maybe he was from this industry, what
Mhm.
advice would you give it to them in order to be successful?
Yeah, don't try to sell your product to them, but rather try to join as a partner with the enterprise, and try to understand the problem, right, that they are trying to solve. It is important for he or she to get into a conversation which is more like a partnership. Driven in understanding the problems we are trying to solve within the industry, and try to see how we can customize the solution to cater the needs, and also try to see if you are already ready with some of these parameters around ethical consideration when we talk about AI solution. So try to understand the problem and partner with them in addressing those.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So for whoever is listening or will be listening to this podcast, whether you're from the industry or from not from the industry, I hope you find today's podcast be useful and relevant. And I want to thank you again, Dr. Santoshi, to coming to the show. I'm looking for the AI responsible AI is being developed, and we'll benefit from it.
Thank you, Leo, for having me. I really enjoyed this podcast. Thank you.